Boldwood presents Not Your Child, written by Sheila Norton and read by Helen Keeley and Gemma Lawrence. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Chapter 1. Gemma. Sometimes, now, I think about how differently everything would have turned out if I hadn't been at work that day. The day I got the message from the stranger on Instagram. I was only going into the office for 2 days a week, working from home on the other 3, so it was unfortunate that it was a bit public when I fell apart. "What's wrong, Gemma?" my line manager Mike asked. He was an older guy in his 50s and tended not to have an awful lot of understanding when it came to anyone displaying emotions. To be fair, I usually tried to act as professionally as possible and not give him, or anyone else, the excuse to blame anything I did or said on the fact that I'm a woman, let alone the mother of a 2-year-old trying to juggle all the usual commitments. But I shouldn't really have been having sneaky looks at Instagram while I was working. Everyone did it, but if one of my directors had happened to come in at that moment, it would have been my emotional breakdown, not my social media habit, that would have looked unprofessional. "Nothing," I managed to reply. "I'm okay, just got to pop outside for a minute." I jumped up from my chair so fast, I knocked a pile of files off my desk and had to stop to pick them up, wiping the tears from my eyes as I did, knowing the other 3 people in our open-plan office were staring at me and beginning to look concerned. I flew out of the door, down the corridor to the toilets, almost choking on my shock and dismay as I ran, and locked myself in one of the cubicles, where I gave way to what I admit must have been pretty horrific howls of anguish. It wasn't until I'd managed to control myself enough to be merely sobbing, rather than sounding like an animal being tortured, that I heard someone on the other side of the door asking in a sympathetic voice, "Are you all right in there? Is there anything I can do?" I took some deep breaths to try to pull myself together. I managed to squeak some kind of response about being fine. I didn't recognise this person's voice, but I knew I had to get back to the office before my own colleagues turned up too, and someone possibly started battering the door down. There was silence outside my cubicle, so after taking a few more deep breaths, I unlocked the door, went straight to the nearest sink, and splashed my face with lots of cold water. When I looked up, dripping, the woman, I knew as soon as she began to speak that she was the one who'd called out to me, was standing against a sink a bit further along. "I thought I'd better wait," she said. Just that, no questions, no more attempt to intervene. "Thank you, I'll be all right now," I told her, just wanting her to go so I could try to do something about the state of my face and try to get myself together. I wasn't all right at all. I didn't know if I ever would be, but I needed to make some attempt at pretense, at least until I got home. "What time do you normally take your lunch break?" the woman asked, not taking the hint and clearing off. "If you can take it now, you probably should. It'll give you a chance to redo your makeup and so on." I'd have to let them know, my colleagues. I'll have to go back and tell them, but I can't. Got your phone on you? Call one of them. Say you're having lunch. It doesn't matter what they think. She paused, tilting her head to one side, looking at me, making me feel uncomfortable. Then she shrugged and added, "I'm just about to take my own break. Come on, wipe the makeup off." She dived into a huge canvas rucksack-style handbag, rummaged around, and produced some wet wipes. "Then we'll go for lunch." "I can't eat," I wailed, beginning to well up again. "Just a coffee then," she said quickly. "We'll sit outside in the shade somewhere to give your eyes a chance to settle down. Don't put the makeup back on yet, if at all." I looked in the mirror. Black mascara streaked down both cheeks, red eyes surrounded by splodges of black. I grabbed her proffered wet wipes and got to work, thanking her, wondering how the hell I was ever going to look presentable again, let alone feel like living. I didn't know the woman, didn't recognise her, had no idea whereabouts in the company she worked. But something about her matter-of-fact manner made me do exactly what she suggested. I called Mike's extension, told him I was taking my lunch break, ignored the tone of his response, and with my head lowered in case anyone else saw me, I followed my rescuer out of the building and round the corner to a little pub in a back street. "There's a beer garden at the back, secluded, and nobody from work comes here anyway," she said, ordering herself a vegan wrap and decaf black coffee and a cappuccino for me, which I doubted I'd be able to swallow for the lump in my throat. We went out into the beer garden, which was almost deserted, and sat at a table under an umbrella. "Okay," she said. "Not really," I admitted, "but thank you." Trying to summon some kind of general social politeness, I added, "Sorry, I don't know your name." "Crystal," she said. "I work in the design studio. You?" "I'm Gemma. I'm just in accounts." "No just about it, is there? Every company needs people looking after their accounts. Not as much as they need people designing their range in the first place." She smiled and shrugged. I looked at her properly for the first time. I hadn't taken in her appearance at all, as I'd been too conscious of my own. But now I realised it was easy to guess she was a designer. She was probably around my own age, mid-30s, but she wore her dark hair long and loose, with streaks of purple in it. She had massive jangly earrings, a nose ring, several tattoos on her arms, which were almost covered up by the number of bracelets she wore, and her dress, well, I'd have called it a caftan. We must have looked a strange pair. Her in her hippie garb, and me in my smart business suit, white shirt, black shoes. Hair that had started off tied back in a neat ponytail, but was now coming loose. And a face swollen from crying. Our coffees and her food were brought to the table, and for a while we sat in silence while she ate. I sipped my cappuccino, which made me feel sick, and tried to stop thinking about Jack, what he'd done to me, how I was going to live the rest of my life without him. When Crystal finished eating, she sat back, wiped her mouth, and just looked at me for a moment before saying, "I'm not going to ask. It's none of my business, obviously, but I'm a good listener, so if you need someone to pour it all out to, someone who doesn't know you, so isn't going to try to give you any advice that you don't want, well, feel free. Otherwise, I'm quite happy just sitting here relaxing while you try to calm yourself down, okay?" I nodded, thanked her again. I sat for a little longer, sipping the cappuccino that I didn't want, staring at the table. And suddenly, I just couldn't stand it any more, not saying anything, not having been allowed to say anything. "He didn't even have the guts to tell me himself," I blurted out. "I've been driving myself mad, waiting to hear from him, emailing him, getting no reply, trying to call him but his number's out of service. I've been so worried about him, and all this time the bastard has been shacked up with someone else, and his brother, who I've never even met, is the only one who had the decency to tell me. And even he just chose to disappear, delete himself after he delivered the news. Great, huh? Probably embarrassed. So what the hell am I supposed to do? I was supposed to be going out there with him, starting a new life." "Out there?" she asked quietly. "Australia." He went out there to his family, and I was going to join him with Poppy, our little girl, when he'd found a home for us. Then he just stopped communicating. Dropped off the internet. His email's not working, his phone's not working, all his social media's closed down, and I have no address for his parents. All I know is they live in the Sydney area. Do you know how many people live in the Sydney area? No, Crystal admitted. Nor do I, but a lot, obviously. And he's been gone for 4 months. 4 months! And for half that time, I've had no idea what's happened to him. He might have drowned on Bondi Beach or been eaten by a shark for all I knew. I went to the police. Do you know what they said? No? They said he was an adult. He'd gone there of his own free will, and he was within his rights to deliberately stop all communication. He's left me and his child. How could he do that to me? To not even tell me, not even have the guts. So his brother didn't even tell you where he was? No. Look, this is it. I reached for my phone. This is what his private message on Instagram says. Let me read it to you. You'll never believe it. Honestly, it's unbelievable. Dear Gemma, I found you on here because I wanted to tell you Jack is with someone else. I know he's changed his number and email. He doesn't know I'm messaging you, but I think it's only right you should be told. He's got no intention of sending for you or the kiddie or ever seeing you again. He's my brother, but I think he's a disgrace and our parents won't talk to him. Sorry to tell you, but you'll have to forget him. I can't tell you where he lives or give you any info. Don't try to contact him. You'll never find him. Or me. Sorry, Ryan. I stopped, swallowing back more tears, not wanting to start bawling my eyes out all over again. Forget him, I managed to say eventually. I'm bringing up his daughter. How can he do this? Crystal got up, came to stand beside me, put her arm round me and stroked my hair as if I was her friend, as if she knew me. What a terrible way to find out, she said gently. You poor thing. We were supposed to get married, I squawked. When I got to Australia, we were going to get married and have another baby. What a good thing you didn't, is all she said. And I knew she was right. I knew I'd probably agree with her eventually, when the shock of it all had died down a bit. But right at that moment, I couldn't even begin to get there. Quite honestly, if it wasn't for the thought of my daughter, I could have just given up, gone home, laid down on my bed, and stayed there forever. But I had to carry on. For Poppy.
Chapter 2. Crystal. At that time, when I first met her, I knew nothing about her. She was just another woman who'd been treated like crap by a guy. And I empathised. Of course I did. I felt sorry for her. She'd had the news at work and got herself into a state. I didn't want to interfere, and I certainly didn't want to make it all about me, so I just did what I could to calm her down. It made me angry to hear how completely callous her other half had been in the way he dumped her. What a cowardly thing to do, to just disappear while he was on the other side of the world and not even have the decency or the guts to tell her. Even the brother didn't sound much better. Sending that message, making it sound like he was being thoughtful and gracious in doing so, and then just erasing himself so she couldn't even respond. Didn't even give her the chance to ask any questions or the satisfaction of a good rant. I liked Gemma from the start. Nobody deserved to be put in that position, let alone when they had a child to consider. But I liked her spirit too, her anger, even while she was so distraught, her fury at being treated the way her ex had treated her. It gave me hope, for her sake, that she wouldn't just fold up and go under the way I had when I'd been put in a similar position. Oh yes, I understood. Only too well. That was why I knew I could help her. I'd been in a very dark place myself, and it hadn't been too long since I'd been able to start hauling myself out of it. I'd had a lot of help, and had finally been able to reach a kind of acceptance. Well, acceptance of most of it for most of the time. I was able to understand that there was only one person to blame for everything I'd been through. And that person was the bastard who'd walked out of my life at the very worst possible time he could have chosen. Who told me there was somebody else and then just disappeared. Leaving me in chaos. Well, it seemed Gemma was a victim of something similar, so of course I empathised with her. From that very first day, all I felt was a completely genuine and heartfelt sympathy. I wanted nothing more than to be her friend. And Names? Well, names can just be coincidental, can't they?
Chapter 3. Gemma. I'd been with Jack for 4 years. I'd met him at work, where he'd been a manager in the personnel department, before moving to a better job in a different company. For at least half the time I'd known him, he'd talked constantly about the idea of emigrating to Australia. I could understand it. His parents, followed by his older sister and her husband, and just a few months ago by his younger brother, had all gone out there to live, and yes, from what he told me, they all seemed to be doing well. I'd never met any of his family, apart from the brother. They'd all been in Australia since long before Jack and I got together, and he didn't seem to communicate with them a lot. He wasn't the type of guy to chat to them on video calls, introducing me and showing off our baby girl. In fact, I often used to berate him about it. "Surely you've sent your parents some pictures of Poppy," I'd say. "She's their grandchild. They must be devastated that they haven't met her yet." "They're not like that," he'd say with a shrug. I couldn't understand it. My own parents were both fanatical about their granddaughter. They'd been divorced for about 10 years, but Mum only lived a few miles away and came to see me and Poppy all the time. Dad had moved up to Manchester, but he called and messaged regularly and loved to chat to Poppy on video calls. But in the end, I just had to accept that every family was different, that perhaps Jack would become closer to his parents and siblings if we finally did decide to move out to Australia ourselves, and that this was one reason why I really ought to consider the idea. I didn't want to consider it. I didn't want to be separated from my own parents. Being an only child, I was acutely aware of how much it would hurt them both if Poppy and I went off to the other side of the world. But, at the same time, I was tempted by the prospect of the better lifestyle Jack kept describing, the better opportunities for us, and, more importantly, for Poppy. And then, one day when I was talking to Mum about it, she surprised me by announcing that if Jack and I decided to go, she'd follow us. "You would?" I said, shocked. Mum had seemed so settled since the divorce, so independent, enjoying her part-time career that fitted so conveniently around her time with me and Poppy, and never seeming to have any interest in looking for another man. I'd never in a million years have imagined her, now in her 60s, wanting to uproot herself again and move across the world. "Of course I would," she said calmly. "You and Poppy are the most important things in my life. Nothing else matters. I wouldn't want to live here without you." It was only then that I told Jack I'd go, and in no time at all, the plans were made. He'd go ahead of me, get a job, and find a home for us all. And then he disappeared. When I got home from work, on the day of his brother's message, the temptation to simply throw myself on the bed and give in to utter despair was still so strong I literally had to grit my teeth to make myself behave normally, like nothing was wrong, like it was an ordinary day. I picked Poppy up from the nursery and asked her about her day, admiring her splodgy paintings and encouraging her little smatterings of chat, her attempts to tell me what she'd done, watching her face light up when I reminded her the next day would be Wednesday, a mummy day. I chatted to her as brightly as I could manage while I prepared her tea and made a supreme, almost superhuman effort to enjoy bath time and story time. As soon as she was asleep, I fell apart again. Thank God I didn't have to go into the office for the next few days. From Wednesday to Friday, I was self-employed, working in a completely different field from my accounting job in town, designing websites and writing copy. I'd been building this work up gradually since Poppy was born, and although some days were busier than others, it was still normally slow enough for me to be able to look after her myself on Wednesdays and Thursdays, working during periods while she was napping or playing quietly, or in the evenings after she was in bed. But on Fridays, Mum usually had Poppy for me, giving me a whole day to catch up on everything. That week, though, I made an excuse to keep Poppy at home with me. Fortunately, I didn't have too much work on anyway, and I knew that if I were to be face-to-face with Mum, I'd blurt everything out. And I couldn't. Not yet. Mum already knew I'd been worried that I hadn't heard from Jack recently. I told her this much, but had played it down, going along with her supposition that he must have been frantically busy. I hadn't told her how long his lack of communication had gone on, or even that I'd been to the police. Telling her that would have meant admitting I'd been more than just a bit puzzled, a bit concerned. And now I knew the truth. I had to try to come to terms with it all myself first, before I could face her. "Oh, darling, I'm so sorry to hear Poppy isn't well," Mum said when I called her, making me feel even worse. What kind of mother pretends her child is ill? What if God or the devil or someone was listening to me and decided to make her really ill to teach me a lesson? I'd still be happy to look after her, though. No, Mum, that wouldn't be fair, in case it's something infectious. There are all sorts of bugs going around at the nursery. That much was true. It was always true. If she has got something nasty, I've probably already caught it from her, so we'll keep ourselves away from everyone else till after the weekend. Don't worry, we'll be fine. I don't know how I managed to lie so convincingly. The truth was, I still doubted I'd ever be fine at all, and I was, in fact, desperate to just throw myself into my mum's arms and tell her everything. Why didn't I? I can only say that the loss of control it would lead to actually scared me. It would be too easy to never recover from it, to completely collapse, to let her take care of me, treat me like a child, to try to spare me all the pain, all the anxiety and problems that were to come. And I knew, despite the state I was in, that I couldn't let that happen. I knew I had to get through it, somehow. So Poppy and I spent the next few days at home on our own, only going out for necessary trips to the shops, for little walks to the seafront, and short periods on the beach with her bucket and spade, during times when I knew it would be quiet. And I spent a lot of time looking at the sea and thinking how easy it would be, if I didn't have Poppy, to just wade into the waves, out of my depth, and let myself sink. "Mummy, come in?" Poppy asked as we stood at the water's edge, looking at me with her head on one side and her hand held out for me to hold, to run and splash in the shallows like we often did, getting her used to the feel of the seawater on her bare feet, splashing her little legs, making her squeal. I shook my head. "Not today, Poppy. Let's go home now. Looks like it might rain." There was a brilliant blue sky above us, the sun already warming up for a fine summer day. But Poppy seemed to accept Mummy wasn't really feeling like a paddle. She'd sensed my mood and had been quiet and unusually placid during the past few days. She was 2.5, turning 3 that October, and could often be a handful, with a fiery, determined nature to match her beautiful red hair. I loved her with a passion I'd never expected to feel when I agreed, a little nervously, relatively soon after getting together with Jack, that it would be a good idea to try for a baby. It was his idea, I recalled angrily, as we started to walk home from the beach. His idea to have this child that he'd somehow managed to just leave behind, like a piece of forgotten luggage, like a discarded wrapper, like a used condom. I think that realization helped me a little. It was probably the moment that my anger at what Jack had done began to completely overtake the hurt and devastation. How dare he? How dare he do this? Not just to me, but to his child. From then on, every time I started to cry, to feel bereft, hurt, lost, sorry for myself, I reminded myself that I'd get over him. He wasn't worth my tears. but I'd never forgive him. It became even easier to feel that anger as the days went by and the practical and financial reality of my situation sank in. Jack had paid his share of the mortgage, utility bills and so on into my account before he left for Australia to cover the first 6 months that he was gone. We were sure it wouldn't even be that long before I joined him. He earned more than me and paid the larger share of all the bills, so now he'd gone. It was only a matter of time before that money ran out. Not only that, but because of his cowardly disappearing act and his brother's equally cowardly refusal to reveal his whereabouts, I wasn't going to get any child maintenance out of him. I was on my own, up the creek without the proverbial paddle. What the hell am I supposed to do? I muttered to myself, looking at a spreadsheet I'd made of my income and outgoings, which frightened me so much I almost erased it all straight away. "Mummy, play with me?" Poppy said, getting up from arranging her teddies on the floor and pulling at my hand. "In a minute, sweetheart," I said distractedly. "Play now, Mummy," she insisted, tugging at me again. I turned to smile at her, even though the smile hurt my face. "You're a bossy boots, that's what you are," I teased, reaching out to tickle her tummy and make her laugh. "All right, Mummy will play. Shall we get your tea set and pretend the teddies are having a picnic?" "Poppy, do it!" She ran to the toy box in the corner of the room and delved inside for the little plastic cups and plates. "Mummy, sit down." I knew when to obey orders. I sat cross-legged on the carpet, the giant at the party, between Big Teddy and White Bunny, and held out my miniature pink teacup for the imaginary tea Poppy poured into it, and ate my imaginary sandwich with as much pretend enthusiasm as I could manage in the circumstances. And the day slowly slid away, and I pretended to forget about the spreadsheet, the mortgage repayments, the bills for another day. But the anger at Jack remained, and it grew, and it festered, and it hardened, until I felt as if my heart was turning to stone. A heart made of stone can't hurt, I told myself. It was easier than being flesh and blood and feeling like I'd been ripped apart. I was going to be the stone woman. That was how I'd get through this. I hoped.
Chapter 4. Crystal. Gemma had mentioned that she was only part-time, so I knew I wouldn't bump into her again at work that week. The chances of bumping into her were pretty remote anyway. It was a big company, a big building, and we worked in completely different parts of it, on different floors. It was just coincidence that I'd happened to pop into the loos on her floor that day, en route from another department. At home on my own, I wondered about the coincidence of our experience. It was almost as if we'd been meant to come together. I pondered it, over and over, getting angry on her behalf, angry with her ex for the way he'd treated her, just as I'd been angry when it happened to me. But no, I didn't want to slide back into that anger. I'd got over all this. I'd been getting better. Everyone had been saying I'd been making good progress. I was at a stage where I felt almost like a perfectly rational, undamaged person, for most of the time. But I'd not only felt compassion for Gemma, I'd really liked her too. I could already sense that she was a nice person, a decent person who hadn't deserved to be treated so badly. I wanted to help her, if I could, just as I'd been helped myself when my world imploded. I can honestly say that was my only motivation at the time. Or was it? I didn't know much about Gemma yet, but there was one thing I did know. She had a child. A little girl. And looking back now, if I'm going to be totally honest with myself, I think I'd have to admit that this was already a factor. Part of the reason I wanted to get close to her. Yes, I can't deny it. At that point in time, I envied everyone who had a child. I was curious about her daughter. I really wanted to meet her.
Chapter 5. Gemma. Needless to say, it wasn't easy walking into my office on the Monday morning. My colleagues actually looked quite relieved that I turned up at all. I could hardly blame them. It was hard now to imagine how I'd sat at my desk on the previous Tuesday afternoon, my face pink and shiny from crying, my head throbbing, my eyes so sore I could barely read anything on the screen, and my mind about 10,000 miles away, instead of focusing on profit, retail discounts and customer accounts. "Are you feeling any better, Gemma?" Mike asked, sounding, to be honest, like his curiosity was getting the better of his sympathy, while young Sophie, our office assistant, put her arm around me and purred in my ear that she'd spoken to the universe about me and could feel good vibes. I resisted the temptation to snap that the universe could stick its good vibes where the sun didn't shine, instead pasting what I hoped was a quasi-pleasant smile on my face and thanking everyone for their concern, offering an apology for being unwell the previous Tuesday and a promise to knuckle down to work now. I'd obviously practiced this little speech at home, in the hope it would sound halfway sincere, although I knew it wouldn't. But it was all I could manage, and everyone got the picture and left it at that. Towards lunchtime, I looked up from my work to see Crystal standing in front of me, holding a file. "This," she said very quietly, waving the file at me, "is just an excuse so I wouldn't feel so stupid in front of everyone if I got the wrong office." I would have laughed if I hadn't been turned to stone. "Hello," I said. I had to admit, it was nice to see her. She was a breath of fresh air in the quiet, studious atmosphere of the accounts office, with her outrageous hair. Surely it hadn't been quite so purple last week. Her jangly bracelets and beads, and, well, I wasn't sure if her trousers had been scribbled over by a hyperactive child using a whole pack of coloured pens and cropped off roughly around knee length by someone half-blind with blunt scissors, or if they were actually supposed to look like that. Her turquoise gypsy-style blouse, by comparison, was almost ordinary. "Want to go for lunch again?" she said, without any beating about the bush. "Like, now?" I liked the fact that she hadn't asked, in front of the others, how I was feeling. "Yeah, that'd be good." I glanced at Mike. "If that's okay." "Sure." He smiled at me. I think he was probably relieved to hear me speak. I'd kept my mouth shut and my nose to the grindstone, so to speak, all morning. "Enjoy!" We went to the same pub and sat in the garden again. This time I ordered a sandwich too, not that I'd regained my appetite at all, but I got back into the routine of eating, purely because of sharing mealtimes with Poppy. A 2.5-year-old, even without a full range of vocabulary, can nevertheless manage a whole inquisition into why you might not feel like eating, and the last thing I could have faced was questions about if I got a tummy ache, if I'd been sick and what colour it might have been, or if I'd had runny poos. "So," Crystal said finally, once we were settled down with a coffee each. She fixed me with a meaningful look. "How are you now?" I shrugged. "Trying to work out how to stay alive." "And you have to, don't you? For your little one." "Poppy, yes." I sighed. "The thing is, I feel so angry now." "Good," she said, nodding emphatically. "So you should." But I feel stupid, too. How could I have loved someone who ended up treating me like this? How could I possibly have believed he was a good guy, a decent, caring man who loved me as much as I loved him? And believed he was such a good father to Poppy, when he quite obviously couldn't care less about her? Was I blind? What did I miss? Surely there must have been signs. Crystal shook her head. "I'm sure he did love you, and Poppy. Something must have happened to change him since he went to Australia." "Yes. He's met some other woman, that's what's happened. But even if he's so obsessed with her that he couldn't care less about me anymore, how could he just cut me off like this with no communication, no financial support, no means of finding him. What am I supposed to do? How am I going to survive? Crystal reached across the table and laid a hand on mine. You will. You can. We do. I looked at her, understanding dawning. It's happened to you, too. She nodded. A few years back, yes. Something similar. I'm not saying it was as much of a shock as what's happened to you. I suspected my boyfriend was seeing someone else, and it turned out I was right. But it still hurt. There were circumstances that made it very painful. But I've survived. So will you. I don't know how. I sniffed. You need to take whatever help you can get. Start applying for everything you're entitled to, as soon as possible. I know I've made a list of calls to make, things to apply for, income support, all that kind of stuff. I dropped my head, trying not to start crying again. But I keep hoping it's all a mistake, that he'll suddenly call me and say, "Would you take him back? After this?" I couldn't answer. My anger was telling me no. But my desperation, my hurt, my years of wasted love were telling me that surely there was always room for hope, for regret and forgiveness. Crystal, watching the look on my face, just nodded slowly, as if she understood. I supposed she did. She'd been there. In a strange way, this made me feel a bit better. Reminded me that I wasn't the only woman who'd been dumped like a sack of garbage. Not that I'd have wished it on her, or on anyone else. Have you got children? I said, suddenly realising I hadn't asked much about her at all. No, she looked away. Sadly not. It was my turn to just nod and stay silent. I didn't want to come out with the same old clichés that everyone probably told her, that she still had time, that she might meet someone else, or, worse, that she should make the most of her freedom. I could see from her face that it was a painful subject, that she'd have liked to have had a child, perhaps with the guy who left her. But she quickly forced a smile back onto her face, and she asked me, as our sandwiches were delivered to the table, to tell her about Poppy. I could feel my own face relaxing, the anxious frown shifting a little as I thought about my little girl. She's 2.5, coming up for 3, I said, and, well, she can be difficult and demanding, of course. She's a toddler, it's a job, but at the same time she's just so sweet, so adorable and funny. She comes out with the cutest things and she's, well, I know all parents must say this, but she's the most beautiful child in the world. Have you got a photo of her? Crystal still had a smile fixed on her face, so I knew she was just being nice, polite, in showing an interest in Poppy, despite her own sadness, and this made me warm to her even more. I opened my phone and scrolled through the dozens of pictures of Poppy on there, determined to show her just one, a really good one, rather than prolonging the pain by making her look at them all. I found one of my favourites, taken just a couple of weeks ago. Poppy wearing her yellow dress with the matching sun hat, standing on the beach, holding her bucket and smiling at the camera. She loves having her photo taken, I said, passing the phone across to Crystal. She's a real little diva. Crystal took the phone from me and gazed at the picture. She blinked a couple of times, looking, I thought for a moment, as if she might burst into tears. "Oh," she said. Just that. "Oh, I'm so sorry," I said, holding my hand out to take the phone back. "I didn't want to upset you." "You haven't. I asked to see her. She's absolutely beautiful." She blinked again and quickly wiped her eyes. "Sorry, it's just... It must be hard, seeing other people with children." "Yes." She held on to the phone and looked at the picture again, shaking her head as if she couldn't quite believe how lovely my daughter was. I felt bad then. She'd been so kind to me, trying to help me in my own distress, and in return, I'd made her cry. "Sorry," I said again. And then, desperate to put things right, I came out with exactly the cliché I'd promised myself not to. "Look, surely you don't have to rule it out completely, do you? Having a baby, I mean." I stopped, immediately regretting it. Apart from being tactless, I didn't know the first thing about Crystal. I had no right to make assumptions. Just because she was sad about not having a child, it didn't mean she was on a desperate quest to have one now. But fortunately, she gave a little snort of laughter. "Well, for one thing, I feel I never want to let another man into my life for anything other than servicing my car or my boiler, and definitely not for servicing me." "I know, I get that, I shouldn't have said. And before you mention IVF or using a surrogate, I wasn't going to. Honestly, I'm sorry. I just wish I hadn't shown you the photo." I sighed, thinking that she probably wouldn't want to have lunch with me again. I was surprised to realise it mattered to me. I hardly knew her, but I liked the idea of having a friend from work, someone who wasn't exactly a colleague but was sort of the same age, as well as being in a similar situation as me. "Don't be daft," she said, putting a hand on mine and managing a smile. "I wanted to see your little girl. It's nice to hear about her too. She's lovely." "Thank you." Crystal took a bite of her avocado sourdough roll and seemed to give herself a little shake before changing the subject, talking about her job, about the flat she lived in, and the fact that her parents were both dead, her only close relative a younger brother who visited her from London occasionally, with a different girlfriend every time. "I'm an only child," I said, "but my mum and I are close, and she only lives in Exeter, so she helps out with Poppy. She has her every Friday, so I can catch up with everything." I explained about my self-employed work, and Crystal looked impressed. "You design websites? That's quite a change. Quite creative, for someone who works as a number cruncher." "I suppose that's why I enjoy it. It's completely different. I was always comfortable with tech. I like fiddling around on computers. So, while I was on parental leave, I thought it would be a good time to see if I could make a go of it. I write copy too, if clients want me to, for websites and media like newsletters or blogs." "Wow, quite an entrepreneur, aren't you? I'm glad. I was worried you were going to have a real struggle, on your own with Poppy, if you could only work here 2 days a week." "I will be struggling," I said quietly, and I put my sandwich down, suddenly losing my appetite, thinking about the spreadsheet I'd made that I still didn't want to look at. The mortgage is in my name. It's my house. Jack moved in with me. My parents helped me get the deposit together, but of course, after I had Poppy and had to cut down my working hours, he paid far more than I did. Not only the mortgage repayments, but the bills too. I don't know how I'm going to manage, to be honest. I could feel myself shaking, panic threatening to overtake me again. What the hell was I going to do? I'd have to sell the house, but I hardly had any equity in it. The bastard could have at least cared enough about his daughter to make some sort of arrangements, even if he didn't give a toss about me. I went on. He ought to be paying maintenance. The child support people can force him to, surely. They'd have to find him first. "So that's what they need to start doing," Crystal said, surprising me with the intensity in her voice. "They need to find him. He needs to pay. You've got to get everyone looking for him, Gemma. Seriously, he might have gone AWOL, but unless he's changed his name, I wouldn't put it past him," I said bitterly. "Keep going with that anger. That's what you need, girl, to get you through this." I'm angry, all right, with myself as much as anything, forever thinking I loved him. But of course, I knew perfectly well what the trouble was. I had loved him, and if I hadn't done, I wouldn't have had Poppy.
Chapter 6. Crystal. That photo. That child. Oh my God, I almost wished I hadn't asked to see it. I didn't expect to react quite that way, but then I hadn't expected Poppy to look like that, to be quite so stunningly beautiful. I'll admit it, it brought me to tears. Seeing that beautiful little girl and knowing her father had turned his back on her, leaving her without a second thought. How could he do that? Poor Gemma. I really felt for her. The anger that had almost destroyed me when I was deserted came rushing back again. Her ex was not only a liar, he was a coward, running away from any confrontation, avoiding any consequences, not giving a damn about his responsibilities. I wanted him to be found, to be dragged through the court and forced to pay up. I wanted him to suffer. I was almost incandescent with rage on Gemma's behalf. But I knew I needed to calm down. If I was going to be friends with Gemma, and I now wanted that desperately, then I had to keep my feelings to myself. To have me ranting furiously to her about her situation wouldn't exactly have helped her. It would have made things worse, and would probably have scared her off. She didn't need to know about my own story, my own suffering. Even if she asked me, it'd be best not to go into details. She needed me to be supportive, not to make her feel worse. Of course, that wasn't the whole reason I was going to be reticent about myself. If she knew everything, she'd have probably started to feel uncomfortable about me, about my motives, my reasons for wanting to be her friend. She might have not wanted me to meet Poppy. And I wanted that now, of course. I so badly wanted to meet that little girl and spend time with her. And I could only do that by becoming Gemma's best friend, without her ever knowing my full story.
Chapter 7. Gemma. Mum called me several times that week, but I still didn't tell her about Jack, even when she asked how he was. I said he'd been busy, thinking to myself that yes, he'd been busy all right, busy cheating and busy lying his way out of my life and into someone else's. But then it was Friday again. How had the world kept turning for 10 whole days since I got that fatal Instagram message? And I knew I wasn't going to be able to put it off any longer. I knew that when I saw Mum in person, I was going to break down again.